Welcome to the Crosscreek podcast, a podcast for you because God is for you. It can be easy to measure faith by the things people can see, what we say we believe, where we go, the words we use, and the religious routines we follow. But Jesus invites us into something deeper, a relationship that changes us from the inside out. In this episode, we explore the difference between fitting into Christian culture and actually following Jesus, and how receiving His love can free us to love others well. So as we close this chapter of Crosscreek, let's talk about it together. As we begin the process of ending this chapter of Crosscreek as we've known it, I don't know about you, but I've been on a whole safari of emotions this month. Like, ooh, that's a new emotion, or oh man, I did not see that one coming. I've asked a lot of questions, I've thought a lot of thoughts, and I've questioned a lot of those thoughts. And one theme that keeps recurring for me is, has Cross Creek failed? I don't think there's a simple answer to that. Things definitely haven't always gone as we imagined or hoped. We tried things and did things differently than others did. Some worked, some didn't. Some of our goals weren't met, and there definitely are some decisions we'd probably change if we could. And now we're at the point where we don't have the people, volunteers, or finances to keep our gatherings going the way they have been. And that's real, and I don't want to minimize it or explain it away. And believe me, if you're part of Cross Creek, I want you to know I wanted Cross Creek to keep going, like more than I can probably tell you. But here's the thing: Cross Creek never existed just to keep Cross Creek existing. Our ultimate goal wasn't to just build an organization, own a building, or fill up a room every week. And I wouldn't have complained if those things happened, and they definitely would have made a lot of things easier. But they weren't the point. The mission of Cross Creek has been to lead people into a transforming relationship with Jesus Christ by inviting our neighbors to discover, enjoy, and share the life Jesus offers together. The point wasn't to just get people to do a church service, because there's a difference between participating in church and following Jesus with our whole lives. There's a difference between learning how to look Christian and allowing Jesus to transform who we are. And honestly, it's surprisingly easy to build a life that looks Christian from the outside. You can use the right words, listen to the right music, wear the Jesus swag, attend the services, post the Bible verses, even be convinced that you believe the right things. Now, none of that is automatically bad. Some of those things can help us move toward Jesus, but none of them proves that our hearts are being transformed by Jesus. Because we can do all the Christian things and still be controlled by anger, pride, selfishness, greed, fear, and prejudice. We can create the appearance of following Jesus when what we're really following is a version of Christian culture that makes us feel comfortable and safe, or certain we're right, or feel better than and superior to them. But if the Jesus we're following always agrees with us, if he never confronts our pride, challenges our assumptions, or changes the way we treat people, then we may not actually be following Jesus. And this isn't a new problem. It's exactly what Jesus encountered throughout his ministry. One of the clearest pictures is in Matthew 15. At this point in Jesus' story, he's become very popular with the people, making waves with the religious leaders, and as only he knows, he's about to make his final journey to Jerusalem. But before that happens, some of the religious big shots from Jerusalem come to investigate what he's all about. Matthew chapter 15, 1 and 2. Some Pharisees and teachers of religious law now arrived from Jerusalem to see Jesus. They asked him, "Why do your disciples disobey our age-old tradition? For they ignore our tradition of ceremonial hand washing before they eat." Now, at first, we're like, yeah, Jesus, like, why are your boys so nasty? Wash your hands. But the issue isn't about hygiene. This is actually about religion. Ritual cleanliness was a big deal in Judaism. God gave Israel laws of ritual purity to set them apart as his chosen people. But God's law never commanded every person to ceremonially wash their hands before an ordinary meal. That was a tradition that developed later. See, some Pharisees had extended these practices that were required of priests and sacred meals into everyday life. And they thought, well, if it's good for the holy priests, we should all do it. And that probably started with good intentions, like sincerely trying to honor God by going above and beyond what God had originally commanded. The problem was that they had begun treating their tradition as though it were God's command. It had become a visible way to decide who was serious about God and who wasn't. And honestly, that's a continuing danger within religion. The appearance of godliness is often more important to us than actually becoming like God. So when the religious leaders looked at Jesus' disciples, they didn't see people who practiced their faith differently. They saw people who were doing faith wrong. And Jesus sees right through them, verses 3 through 6. Jesus replied, "And why do you, by your traditions, violate the direct commandments of God? For instance, God says, 'Honor your father and mother,' and anyone who speaks disrespectfully of father or mother must be put to death. But you say it's all right for people to say to their parents, 'Sorry, I can't help you, for I have vowed to give to God what I would have given to you.' In this way, you say they don't need to honor their parents, and so you cancel the word of God for the sake of your own tradition." I love how Jesus actually never answers that question. He just asks his own question. And these leaders, they're worried that his disciples are breaking their tradition. Jesus is worried that their tradition is causing people to ignore God's actual heart. And so he gives them an example. God commanded people to honor their parents. It's actually one of the top big 10 commandments, which included caring for them when they grew older. But the leader's tradition allowed someone to declare their resources dedicated to God and then use that religious vow as a reason not to take care of their aging parents. So something that looked deeply devoted to God had become a religious excuse to not love the people God had commanded them to care for. Their tradition wasn't helping them obey God anymore. It was helping them avoid obedience while still feeling righteous. And that's what Jesus sees in them. Their confidence in their outward faithfulness had blinded them to how far their hearts had drifted from God. See, religious culture and religious routine are not the same thing as following the King. So Jesus continues. Verses 7 through 9. "You hypocrites! Isaiah was right when he prophesied about you, for he wrote, 'These people honor me with their lips, but their hearts are far from me. Their worship is a farce, for they teach man made ideas as commands from God.'" So, what may have started as a sincere attempt to honor God had become a substitute for actually obeying God. See, they knew the language, they kept the visible practices, and were convinced they stood on God's side. But Jesus said their lips were close to God while their hearts remained far away. The practices that were supposed to form them in God's character had become substitutes for actually living it. And God isn't asking for religious performance, He asks for us, and for that relationship to reshape who we are and how we think and love. And now, before we use this passage to point fingers at other Christians or other churches, we need to hear it ourselves. See, if you're part of Crosscreek, let's be honest. Crosscreek developed its own culture too. We had our preferences about how church should look and sound. We had things we did and things we deliberately didn't do that kind of actually helped us recognize people as one of us. And some of that was helpful and good. Some of it may have created blind spots. And we have to ask, did that culture help people move toward Jesus and become people who love like Jesus? Because Cross Creek was never meant to make us better at looking Christian. It was meant to help us become more like Jesus. The goal was never to create cookie cutter churchgoers who learned how to fit the American Christian mold and maybe just do a little less obvious sins than they did last year. The point was to lead people to Jesus and invite them to experience the transformation and life he offers. And in his Sermon on the Mount, Jesus takes this even further. He says it's possible to participate in religious culture without actually following him. And we can use his name, say impressive things, even do miraculous things, while completely missing a relationship with him. Matthew 7:21 through 23. "Not everyone who calls out to me, 'Lord, Lord,' will enter the kingdom of heaven. Only those who actually do the will of my Father in heaven will enter. On judgment day, many will say to me, 'Lord, Lord, we prophesied in your name and cast out demons in your name and performed many miracles in your name.' But I will reply, 'I never knew you. Get away from me, you who break God's laws.'" See, Jesus isn't saying we need to constantly be worried about whether we're in or not. He's warning that a public Christian identity, even one that looks impressive, is not the same as following him. Following Jesus is about knowing Jesus and allowing that relationship to reshape us. When we know him, obedience stops being a way to prove that we deserve God's love. it becomes a response to the love we have already received, living a life shaped by Jesus' love. Following Jesus stops being about using the right traditions, political positions, church style, or version of Christian culture to prove that we belong. Instead, our lives become increasingly shaped by the love of Jesus. Because one of the clearest signs that we're following Jesus is that over time, he changes how we love. And that's why we started Crosscreek. We never wanted to just help people become more immersed in Christian culture. We wanted to help people discover the actual life Jesus offers, a life with him that slowly transforms us from the inside out. It's a life of true freedom, like the freedom the Apostle Paul described in his letter to the Galatians. Galatians 5:13 and 14. For you have been called to live in freedom, my brothers and sisters, but don't use your freedom to satisfy your sinful nature. Instead, use your freedom to serve one another in love. For the whole law can be summed up in this one command: love your neighbor as yourself. The freedom Jesus gives us isn't the freedom to do whatever we want. It's freedom from constantly trying to prove ourselves, and freedom to give ourselves away in love. And we can't earn God's love by looking right, saying the right things, or performing the right religious activities. We can only receive the love God has already offered us through Jesus. And we receive that love by trusting Jesus, the crucified and risen King, and placing our lives in his hands. And when we receive that love and learn to enjoy it, it begins changing our hearts, freeing us to become people who genuinely love and serve others. Following Jesus isn't a religious performance used to secure God's love. It's a life that flows from the love God has already given us. So, here's my invitation this week, and really for the rest of our lives. Keep following Jesus. This week, read the Sermon on the Mount, Matthew 5 through 7, or if you want extra points, read the entire book of Matthew. Not to complete a religious assignment or prove that you're a good Christian. Read it because if we want to follow Jesus, we need to keep coming back to the actual Jesus. And as you read, ask yourself 4 questions. Does this sound like the Jesus I think I'm following? What comforts me? What confronts me? And where am I tempted to explain his words away? So keep following Jesus, and then keep enjoying the life he gives. Before you turn his words into another list of things you need to do better, remember that you are not trying to earn his love. You are learning to live from the love he has already given you. So, take time each day to thank Jesus for the love you don't have to earn or maintain. And then keep sharing Jesus' love throughout your day, especially when you're dealing with someone difficult, someone different, or someone you're tempted to think of as them. Ask, what does Jesus' love look like right now? Does it look like listening, apologizing, forgiving, serving, speaking honestly, giving someone the benefit of the doubt? And then do the next loving thing. Just do it. And as we keep discovering, enjoying, and sharing the life Jesus offers, we keep doing it together. See, our weekly gatherings are ending. This podcast will probably end, but the relationships formed here are not. I don't know exactly what those relationships will look like in the months ahead. And I don't want to make promises about the future that I really can't guarantee. But when Crosscreek closes the book, we don't suddenly become strangers. I don't want us to simply disappear from one another's lives. Some of us may become part of other churches or find new communities to walk alongside. And that's a good thing. But what we have shared here as Crosscreek doesn't become meaningless just because we no longer gather every week. Crosscreek's mission has always ended with one important word: together. And whatever comes next, I hope we keep finding ways to live that out. So, was Crosscreek successful or did it fail? I still don't think it's that simple. Some things we tried did fail. Some of our goals were never met. And our attendance and finances show us that the reality that we couldn't make weekly gatherings sustainable. I don't want to pretend otherwise. But those things can't tell the whole story of what God did through this community. And I don't know how far the ripples have traveled or what may continue growing because of what happened with Crosscreek. Because Crosscreek has always been more than an organization, a name, or a weekly gathering. It's been us, a group of people discovering, enjoying, and sharing the life Jesus offers together. And some of the deepest evidence of what God has done will be found in who we are becoming and how we continue to live. Are we becoming more like Jesus? Are we becoming freer to love people who are different from us? Are we becoming more interested in loving people well than in proving that we're right? Because looking Christian is easy, but following Jesus will confront us, change us, and ultimately set us free. So Crosscreek may stop gathering every week, but the gathering was never the mission itself. It was an important tool that helped us live the mission. When every one of us discovers more of Jesus' love, enjoys that love, and shares it with someone else, Crosscreek's mission continues to bear fruit. So, if Crosscreek or this podcast has helped you move even one step closer to Jesus, don't stop there. Help someone else discover the life he offers. And wherever you go from here, keep following Jesus.